Dream Big with Tonee Shelton, like with her life-changing children's book. Yeah, what's going on? You got King Cam, you listen to King Cam and Jube podcast and Jube Meets Message, and we have another wonderful, accomplished author in the building, Tony with two E's,
With two
Shelton.
E's.
Yeah, what's going on?
Oh man, Tony with two E's is just excited and blessed to be on this wonderful podcast. Thank you, King Cam. I appreciate you.
No problem because Miss Blanton, she's at my school at DeSoto High School. She said if you're interviewing people, if you're interviewing authors, new authors, black authors, bring Tony Shelton to the podcast, and we're glad
Well,
you. And check this out. To my understanding, you just was at Pan African Bookstore.
I was, yes. I just had a reading and book signing this past Saturday at Pan African Connection Bookstore.
Right. Shout out to Mama Kwete.
Yes, I
Yeah.
love everything about her and her beautiful family,
Yeah,
truly.
it's awesome. It's awesome. All right, so tell the people before we get into how to dream big, how you're gonna tell us how to dream big in a minute, but tell the
Okay.
people a little bit about you. Tell the people about you.
Yeah, I'm Tony. I've been talking, I think, probably since I came out of the womb. I identify with being a little bit of a misfit. So I've shared previously that I'm an only child, and my elementary journey was very interesting. I
Mm,
think a lot of people, especially that millennial age group, we went through that whole gifted and talented and cluster class, that
mhm.
whole like they set us apart if we were like academically, special or whatnot. And so I always was bouncing in and out of those classes because I was pretty smart, I guess, from a traditional sense, but just
Mm.
the behavior piece. I had a hard time making friends. I was bullied significantly in like
Wow.
second or third grade, but I've always been a bit on the creative side. I think it's that only child piece. You got to make ways to entertain yourself, right? Because the adults, they have an adult time. And I came
Yeah.
up in a time where you had to stay out of grown folks' business. So
They,
that
they
means I had to create my own. And so I have a background in social work. I'm a Baylor grad, and
okay.
I have a lot of work experience in the nonprofit and the school based sector.
Mhm.
COVID happened in 2020, went home to spend time with my parents. The world literally slowed down. And I asked myself the question, what is it that you really need to be doing and focusing on
Mm.
in this lifetime? What is God calling you to do? And I'd always been reading poems and doing poetry. And then in college, I started kind of writing and doing the little open mic nights and stuff like
Okay.
that. So I had like little poems all over in notebooks and journals and in the notes app in my phone. And so I told myself in 2020, I said, okay, if the Lord blesses us to get out of COVID
Yeah.
and to get back some little sense of normalcy, I'm going to write a book.
Okay.
And so my preacher had put out books. I went to him. I said, hey, I noticed you put out books. I'm going to do that myself. What's the process? And he shared with me the publisher. And Cam, in 2021, I self-published my first book of poetry, In
Hmm.
Search of Freedom. I used my social media. My friend owned a barbershop. We did a book signing there. And
Okay.
I've just never looked back. I've self-published works every year. Last year, I put out a digital chat book called Growth, Poems for Evolution. I was a contributing author to another book.
Wow.
So I just be talking and writing.
So,
That's
but
a
my
little bit
question
about me.
is, if you're facilitating
Yeah.
and you're a poet
Uh,
and a social worker, how do you find time to write?
Yeah, so I'm one of them girls that don't have a husband and them kids. So I got a little bit of free time. I mean, I'm being honest. I got a little bit more free time in this season of life than other people.
Right.
I keep my phone on me like we all do. I try to keep a notebook on me as well, and I write throughout the day.
Hmm.
I write at night, I write in the morning, but I jot notes in my phone. I think that's really important for people to keep a notepad on them or to always have some type of phone
Hmm.
heavy with them so that you're writing and you're pouring into that. And then
Yeah.
I journal in the mornings as well. I believe that we have to continue to cultivate and stir those gifts. And you know what? We don't find time. I feel like great people and excellent people don't find time; they make time.
Right.
And so that's kind of how I move.
Because a mentor. a great man. He told me, he said, a short pen is better than a long memory.
Mm,
Yeah.
it's real.
And
That's real.
how did you come with the idea of writing the book? Of writing, how did you come with, did you, first of all, did you always want to be an author? Did you always want to write? Did you always want to do that?
Yeah, so my parents, I came up in a house of non-readers, and so it
Oh,
was exciting to them. I think that I was interested in reading books, and so on one of my favorite author and my first author in general, I read a lot of Stephen King early. That's horror
wait a minute,
sci-fi
wait a minute.
thriller. Yeah,
We don't we don't deal with that. We don't go into the nether regions of books.
yeah. No, I'm gonna tell
Stephen
you,
King.
my parents, I get because they weren't readers. I feel like they were
So
just
you
like
read that
not
to them.
engaged, huh?
You read that to them?
No, I didn't read it to them. So I was learning some things I probably didn't need to be knowing ahead of time. But Stephen King's books, like when I think of like Carrie and Rose Matter, and I mean, it's just numerous books that I feel like they were so compelling as you read them and they just kind of open your mind. And I realized between that and I read, my mom bought me Fly Girl by Omar Tyree.
All
And I think
right.
I was like 12.
Yeah.
And because there was a black owned bookstore in, I'm from Killeen, Texas.
Okay, Colleen.
And I remember there was a chapter in it about she was getting ready to be active, right?
Mm.
And my mom was like, I was like, oh, what does this word mean? And she was like, wait, what is that? What is
Oh
that
Lord.
word?
Oh Lord.
So I learned, that books can transport you, they can give you information, they can take you to other worlds, and I just was always like, man, when I get older, like I want to be able to do something like that. I don't
Right.
know if it was specifically being a writer. Like growing up, I'm a Destiny's Child, Beyonce baby, so I really
Oh
wanted to
boy.
be a singer. Like I really wanted to, I just didn't get the voice.
Oh man. Is that my
But
mellow?
I felt like God wanted me to do something creatively. Like
Yeah.
I always knew that piece.
Yeah. So the thing is, I came up in a generation where we didn't mess with Jason and Freddy Krueger. You came in with the
Right.
books. So, but that's really awesome, and it's important to know that family does play. Believe it or not, family has a role
Yes.
in our upbringing when it comes down to reading and literacy. Because my love for history came from family history, and
Wonderful.
it came from my parents buying books for me. And
Hmm.
um, so speaking of that, why is literacy important to you? Why is literacy important?
Well, I think literacy is important, especially when we think through historically. People have been able to oppress people and they've been able to use the written word to do it.
Mm,
Literacy to me is understanding how to put together letters and words, and to tell a compelling story, but also to communicate something on the written format. And we've seen how people have used treaties and policies and been tricksters and
wow.
kept people ignorant, right? Even when we look at the legacy of Black people that were had the privilege to be in this country, but looking at historically and how slavery occurred,
Mm,
if it was against the law, and you would murder and kill people to know how to read, then clearly reading must be important. And I think it's about communicating and comprehending what's being communicated. And
right.
literacy to me is you never want to be ignorant, you never want to be illiterate, and you never want people that mean you no good to be able to manipulate and control you. So literacy, you need it. You need to know how much that lease is going to be, right?
Man.
You need to know how much that check is going to be. You need to
Yeah.
be able to read that job description adequately.
Yeah.
You gotta, what Kanye said, they throw in contracts and me, that N-words can't read. The
Wow.
truth of that, there are people sold careers to use the word to manipulate, confuse, distract, and all of that. So literacy is important, and people that cannot read means they can't adequately communicate when they
Hmm.
need something, and it means that other people can manipulate and control them to their detriment.
Yeah, and we see that a lot when it come down to our athletes or our musicians.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Everything is fine until 10 years later. You get
Mm-hmm.
tired of doing all of this. And
Mm-hmm.
then you look at the paperwork. He says in perpetuity, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. The image and likeness. stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. So
Yeah.
it's very important that we inspire people to read, to write, and to continue to write books. And
Mm-hmm.
and this is your new book. My question, how you says dream big,
Mm-hmm.
a poem for young dreamers. Okay, but my
Mm-hmm.
question, how did you come up with the idea for this particular book, this one?
Yeah, so in 2023, I was asked to read a poem at a family engagement event. And
Oh
so
boy.
I just moved recently from the Central Texas area. And again, I was telling you, I have that background in nonprofit
Yeah.
work, but the work that I was doing also allowed me to do my poetry as well to support our campuses.
Oh,
Right. So I've always been a woman that's worn multiple hats and tried to use those hats for the betterment of other people, in particular our kids. And so I was invited to do a poem for a family engagement event. It was a poetry night that they were doing. And I read it, and the parents and the staff and the kids, like the reception was just
mm.
it was really unparalleled. And I was like, I mean, I think I do a good job as a poet, and I know I've done some readings better than other, but it was just the energy in the air and the words of affirmation and people wanting to know, could they have the poem? Could they blow the poem up? Is the poem
Wow.
for sale? Would I, and so I was like, okay, well, let me email you the PDF of sure,
Right.
and just over time, I said, you know what? I've been writing these books of poetry. I've been partnering with I've been partnering with visual artists um, to do my covers. I said, what would it actually look like to stretch myself a little bit in this writing career and do a children's book? So I had kind of perfected, the writing for the poetry, the Google Doc, the editing, the working with the cover, telling them what I want, the money I needed to put it out, all of that kind of stuff. I knew how to build a book. I think I've
Gotcha.
gotten to the point where I'm comfortable building a book.
The process, right.
At children's book life, though, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to work with someone for an extended amount of
Yeah.
time. What is that going to cost me? I have a vision for it, but I can't draw. How much is it going to be was a big factor. And then just oh, do we really want to write a children's book? Like that's a new audience.
Baby is
Will
baby.
people
Yeah.
will people buy it? Some of the
Mm.
stuff I've written has been very controversial. And so I'm like, can we get in the kids lane? But I'm a believer, I'm a Christian. And, there's a scripture, it talks about like us not having a spirit of fear and
Mm.
being timid. And, you got to be courageous. And so I worked with an awesome illustrator. Her name is Crystal Peterson.
Yeah.
She wears multiple hats as well. She works in the higher ed space. And we worked for about 7 to 8 months on building this book out. And I said, okay, let's do it. My father used to read to me before bedtime. I think that's
Wow.
super important. My dad used to come in and he would read a book or so, and then he would pray with me, and then he would spit Invictus. I don't even. I tell people, I'm like,
Man,
I
that's the
don't know
poem.
what that man was spitting Invictus, but I guess that is the love of poetry.
Yeah.
Maybe he was planting a seed, and he
Yeah.
didn't even know, that he was talking to a future poet.
Yeah.
And I was in a season where some things happened as far as like me facing unemployment. And I've just been grateful because several of the themes in here are inspiring our children to be courageous. There's one part of the poem in particular, it talks about us encouraging the kids to be bold, brave, and brilliant with no
Mm.
ceiling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I said this for young dreamers, but actually in this season, like I needed that reminder. So,
Wow.
it's funny how God will
Yeah.
have you work some things out and you're thinking, this is the outcome, but really it's like, nah, I knew what was getting ready to happen in 2025, and I needed to remind you with your own words
Yeah.
what you need to be, how
Yeah.
you need to be approaching things. And so, yeah, dream big.
Yeah.
It's here.
And so the thing is, what is your biggest now that you have your book,
Okay.
now that you have, you started to road trip and everything, what is your biggest challenge? How do you build your audience around that?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest challenge. And, I am far from I tell people that say they want to write books all the time. There's the writing the book and getting it out, and then there's the selling the book and
Oh,
connecting and
hmm.
getting it in the hands of the people that need it, right?
Right.
Them is two different things, and I'll be transparent on here and say I have not perfected that. I have a beautiful family network and I have friends that have invested and bought books from me time after time
That
after
goes a long
time.
way.
But I can't sit here and say like, oh, I'm making all this money. I'm not. I actually, up until this point, I've put more money into the writing books, into doing things pro
Hmm.
bono, into the speaking than I've ever netted. But I think the barrier is the creativity in the marketing and the advertising. I think you can put out something beautiful,
Hmm.
but if you're not strategic about your audience knowing how to connect with you, and if you're not just gonna flat out work hard, I don't know if needs to hear this and you laugh, but I'm like,
You gotta go and get it.
I'm gonna be transparent.
Yeah.
I love the writing aspect. When I tell you Saturday morning for the Pan African Connection book signing and reading,
Yeah.
it was raining cats
Yes, it
and dogs.
was. Yes, it was.
And I was just like, oh my gosh, like it's raining.
Yeah.
Nobody is gonna come to this. Who
Nope.
wants to hear this? So I started this weird like negative self-talk, and I
Oh
had to
wow.
really like God had to come down and be like, girl, focus.
Hmm.
And I think that's the thing with barriers I'm learning in this process is not about the outcome, it's the process.
Hmm.
I had my table set up. I had my snacks. I had my book. I had my strategy. I had how I was going to greet, the owners. I knew that if there was no one in that audience or if there was 75 people in that audience,
Right.
I was going to execute on that vision. And so rain, sleet, or snow, I packed my stuff up. I drove through the rain. I walked in, I greeted Miss Aquete. I set my stuff up. I
Yeah.
spoke to everyone. And I had a best friend that drove up from Waco to surprise me. I had a woman I met at another event, didn't even know she was keeping up with me. She came, and it was a young man that was working in the store that heard me
Yeah.
talking about the book and came and sat down. So if we're honest, and then a sorority sister came, there were 5 people that showed up for that book reading and signing. They got a reading. We discussed what it meant to dream. We
Wow.
had snacks. We took our photos and I executed because Kim, what
Yes.
I'm learning
Nice.
in this process is like the barriers are just building blocks to get you to become the person you need to be.
Wow.
I know one day Tonee Shelton is going to have a book out and there's going to be a price point to get in and we're going to fill
Woo.
arenas. I
Yeah.
know that about myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the
New
feeling
York best-selling author.
right. The feeling of the arenas, though, starts with you taking the craft seriously when 3, 4, or 5 people. There's
Yeah.
a very close person to me. He's kind of like a mentor, and I value his insight. He speaks to people. I'm like, how do you speak to people with such clarity and vision? And he's like, oh, well, I was taught. You speak to
Mm.
5 people the same way you would speak to 5,000.
That's right.
And that resonated.
That's
We
right.
feel like, oh, I'm on, it's only one person in here.
Don't
Well,
matter.
that one person came to get fed.
That's
And
right.
you need to be the one that's putting the food down and practicing the executing with precision so that when the 5,000 comes, you're ready. But see, we think, oh, well, oh, nobody's there. Oh, it's raining. I'm not going to do it. And it's like, nah, you building the muscle. It's the
That's
reps.
right.
You got to get your reps in.
That's right. And
Yeah.
so and so building your reps in with your new book, your children's
Mm-hmm.
book. So before we get into how to dream big, we have an
Okay.
important question. The fan want to know.
Uh-oh.
Very important question. Spicy food or mild food?
Mild food.
Thank you. Somebody agrees with me.
Mild food.
Because everybody has been team spicy around here.
Wow.
I don't need those problems.
They are funny. Yeah, I don't need them either.
Yeah, yeah. So you heard it, Miss Tonee Shelton. She team mild food.
Team mild food.
There it is.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go. So the question is, how to dream big? Tell us how to dream big, because people may
Mm.
not know what to do or where to start. How to dream big.
Oh man. Honestly, Kim, you really got to be still.
Mm,
And it's so funny because my whole life I have gotten into trouble trying to be about that action.
yeah.
And yes, action is important, But the dreaming comes from you slowing down enough to hear what spirit man needs, what
Mm-hmm.
God is saying to you, so that you can adequately plan how you strategize to move forward.
Wow.
So I would say, first off, is be still.
Mm-hmm.
You really have to be intentional about quieting the noise. And because the noise isn't just, being a father or working full time or being an entrepreneur. It's looking at social media first thing in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
It's always listening to other people's voices, the self-help train. I'm guilty of this myself, ingesting other people's dialogue and then
Yeah.
trying to make that work. It's being still enough to just hear what it is that God's trying to say to you and what it is that your soul and spirit needs without the input of other people. Because other people have been great to us and they've
Mm-hmm.
also been our barriers. You asked me about a barrier
Yeah.
earlier. How is it that children come onto this earth when they know limit soldiers?
Yeah.
They're like, I'm gonna
Serious.
be an astronaut, I'm gonna be a pirate, I'm gonna be in the NBA, I'm gonna be Beyonce, I'm gonna be an entrepreneur, but I'm also gonna be a neurosurgeon, and I'm
Yeah.
also gonna be a PE teacher, and I'm also gonna be a social worker, and I'm gonna drive a Jetta, and like it's just like,
All the things.
okay, you're
Yeah.
gonna puff the magic dragon,
Yeah.
you know. And I think when we're still, we can realize, oh, is that voice, is that thought mine?
Mm-hmm.
In the stillness, you get the clarity, and I think you get the rest, and then I think you get the ideas.
Hmm. Clarity,
You
rest, and
get the
ideas.
dreams, the
Yeah.
clarity, the rest. When you have the clarity and the rest, you then have the space for the ideas. How many times, Cam, have you had an idea or felt something or saw something for your podcast to move you forward, but you were like out doing something, or it took a back seat because you had to get this done and
Yeah.
that done, and you had to weigh out like, oh, and then you look up a month or two and you like, I never reached out to that person to get them on the podcast.
Yeah.
I never bought that other piece of I
Sorry.
never bought that other piece of equipment, right? Oh, I never got it on this platform. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's incorporating stillness and quiet time every day that the Lord blesses us with, so that we can get that clarity and that vision to hear. And then we can start having those ideas.
Yeah.
And those ideas, getting them out, I think it's important. Whether you have like a vision board or you have a whiteboard or you're journaling, just literally spending time writing down, like, okay, here's what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the books of poetry. It's funny, when we were in COVID and I did have to slow down because I was working remote, I
Okay.
was able to compile all my poems, and I said, I want to write a book. And so I remember writing down, like, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write a book. I'm going to write
Mm-hmm.
a book. I think it's the power of repetition. I think
Yeah.
there's even research back when you write out goals and things,
Yeah.
there's power, because then you're going to start literally like orienting your entire life to make
Yeah.
those things happen. Yeah. I
Write the
think it's
vision,
about
make it
taking the
plain.
time. Go ahead.
They said, write the vision, make it plain.
Write the vision and make it plain.
Yeah.
And then you also honestly realize you got to look real stupid and crazy. You're going to look, when you start talking about dreams,
Man.
and that's another thing too. Actually, I would say maybe be mindful of talking about the dreams, right? If you're not talking to God, and maybe
Yeah.
if you're maybe married to someone or you have a partner that you trust or a close friend, you
Mm-hmm.
may can share things with them. But I would be mindful of maybe broadcasting that dream before you've allowed
Yeah.
God to really cultivate it within you. Because when we let other voices in, that's when the doubt comes. You kind of got to block out the noise and know you're going to look crazy
Mm.
because you're going to be going against the grain. Dreaming is different because everyone's used to the repetition and the doing and the staying inside the lines. Dreams
Mm-hmm.
require that we're, minimizing or getting rid of lines altogether, because we're saying, I want to create something that's never been done before. And you got to have the audacity to look crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. You got, and sometimes you got to go out there by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it is what it is. If it's one person or if it's 5,000, but you got to be crazy enough to go ahead and go out on a limb and say, I'm going to bet on me. I'm going to do this for me. Just like you and putting this book together.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, this is really good because children. our black and brown children do not get enough of these kind of books. And
Mhm.
so, and by you writing this book is pretty cool. But now, because what about this book? No one is coming to save you.
Ah.
Yeah, no one is coming to save you. What about this one? This is pretty interesting. Tell us a little bit about this one too.
Yeah, no one is coming to save you. So up until no one is coming to save you, I've been putting out books of poetry.
Yeah,
But what was funny, Kim, about the books of poetry is that I was landing events where people would come and ask me, to do a poem or something. And then I was also landing events where people would come and just ask me to talk
right.
or to like give a training, or in my job I did professional development, so putting
Yeah,
together PowerPoints and then sharing things with people, being a facilitator. And so no one is coming to save you was birthed out of this realization that I had.
Mm-hmm.
I was putting the books out, but I had this intense desire that, like, I just felt like I also needed to do more. Like, I
Wow.
felt like God was like, you need to do more. But I physically, like Tonee, was waiting on just this like magical, mythical moment. And I was waiting
Mm-hmm.
on this like idealized version of myself to appear before I stepped into that. So
Mm-hmm.
no one is coming to save you was one a way of me allowing some of my audience to get to know Tonee outside of the poetry, outside of the professional sector.
Mm-hmm.
At the time, my LLC is called Better Watch Your Tone. Sometimes we
Okay.
can send the representatives, right? So
What's the
no one is.
LLC again? I'm sorry. What is it
Oh,
called
Better
again?
Watch Your Tone
Better
LLC.
watch your
Better
tone.
watch your tone, right? I was
All
talking
right.
about it's about how I speak to myself that matters most, right? So I was talking about having that positive self affirmation and positive inner dialogue. And I
Right.
was realizing, as someone who struggled a little bit sometimes with their emotions, very moody, I'm a Cancer.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, we
it's really
can be.
important
Yeah, we
that.
can be. Yeah.
What happened?
Yes, we can be moody. Yeah,
Oh,
we
you my
can.
Cancer
Yeah.
brother?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yay! When is your birthday?
July 16th.
Okay, you a Cancer.
Yeah.
So I'm June 23rd.
All
So
right.
some folk will say, they'll try to throw me over there with the two faces over there,
Oh
the
goodness.
Gemini. Some people they're like, you don't really give me full Cancer vibes. But either way, as a Cancer, my emotions and passion, like very intuitive and perceptive, sometimes they would overwhelm me to the point of
Right.
stagnation. So
Mm.
I wrote No One Is Coming to Save You. One is just a reminder to myself of like everything that we thought that makes us weird. I talk a little bit about being a Tammy talk a lot, being disruptive in
Mm.
class and how I internalized that negatively. I talked about finding my own personal style, right? I came
Yeah.
out I went through high school from '06 to 10. We started out with Knuck If You Buck. We
Yeah.
ended with Lil Wayne was a skateboarder,
Yeah.
young money, but then Rihanna was like pop culture. Beyonce was talking about put a ring on it, and the New Boys was talking about you're a jerk. So I started out with Knuck If You Buck, and I ended with jerking. So it was
Yeah.
a lot
Yeah.
that happened. So I was wearing tutus. I like Lady Gaga. But it was always like pushing the lens on embracing who we are. So No One
Mm-hmm.
Is Coming to Save You was just a little like inside look to how I navigated the small lessons that I learned about being weird, being different, being disruptive, and how all of those things, once you identify that those are actually gifts, you'll realize you
Mm-hmm.
don't need saving. God instilled everything within you.
So my thing is, do you have any, because we got a few more minutes, do you have any new projects and or new events coming up?
Yeah, so new events that are coming up. I just relocated to the Dallas area, trying to get my name out there.
Yeah.
And I am going to be a vendor at Dee Dee McGuire's brunch event this Saturday.
Okay.
I think it's called like Together We Brunch. And then what I'm really excited about is on April 5th in East Waco, Texas, at my friend's barbershop.
Yeah.
We are doing another reading of this children's book and book signing, but I'm going to
Okay.
go a bit deeper. Like I'm going to get we're going to have coloring sheets. There's going to be an exercise that we'll do for the kiddos as far as asking them, how do they dream big? We're going to have an author and illustrator talk back. There's going to be some
Okay.
cupcakes and some snacks. And
Next. Very
Yeah,
important.
right. The snacks. We can't forget the snacks. So that's April 5th from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. in East Waco, Texas. I'm going to do
Okay.
another reading and book signing and some activities.
And
So I'm
where's
really
that?
excited.
And where's
Huh?
that? Where is that at?
It's in Waco, Texas at Rock My Style Barbershop.
Rock My Style Barbershop. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how
Mm-hmm.
can the people follow you? How can they find you?
Yeah, you can follow me. I'm on Facebook as author Tonee Tonee Shelton. You can
Okay.
follow me with that. I post it's a little bit of my personal life, but I also showcase some of my speaking events. And then you can follow me on Instagram if interested. It is my first middle initial and last name, so Tonee B Shelton. And I post a lot of my content. My Instagram is a little bit different. I showcase my events, but I also I consider myself an influencer. You
Yeah.
do not have to have a lot of followers to be an influencer. You just
These are
have to
facts.
influence. You
Yeah.
just have to influence people to do good things. And
That's
so
right.
I showcase like inspirational content. I'm always like doing my little outfits, maybe a little positive affirmation for the day. And then I have a YouTube channel as well, but
Okay.
I'm not on that enough. I need to grow my YouTube follower. That's what you
Yeah.
need to hold me accountable to do is spend more
I'm,
time on
I'm
YouTube.
hold you to it. I'm gonna hold you to
Yeah.
it. I'm gonna hold you
Yeah.
to it. Yeah. So before we go,
Okay.
what is your message for the world? What is your message for the world?
Oh, block out all the noise and get busy. God
Block
gave
out
you
all.
everything. Yeah, block out all the noise and get busy. God gave you everything that you need inside of it. Let's activate and let's get to work.
All right. All right. We appreciate it. Thank you for coming. Thank you
Of
for
course.
coming. Yeah, we would love to have you come back on your talk about your other books. Yeah. So
Yeah. Thank you for having me. This was
yeah.
really fun.
All right, y'all. You listen to King Cam with Jube podcast. We just got to talking about how to dream big with Tonee with two E's,
Tonee with two
Shelton.
E's.
Yeah. And we will talk to you later. All right, y'all.